nobody's invincible, and it doesn't matter how much people think they are. Everyone thinks it happens to somebody else. The same with all illnesses. It happens to somebody else's family. It happens to somebody else. It doesn't happen to you and people you know and people you love. But just because it hasn't doesn't mean it never is going to happen to your family.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, this is episode 143, and this is episode 3 of our Beyond Running series. Now, if you haven't listened to any of the previous episodes, over the course of 8 weeks, I am covering topics that are often ignored, they are often brushed under the carpet, they have a lot of stigma attached to them. And these are things that many of you have reached out to me over the years and asked me for help with or really struggled with. And it has just crushed my heart knowing that I didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do, couldn't help as much as I would love to. And so I decided that I was going to bring these topics, these things that people have to work through, these struggles to the forefront to talk about them because they are important to be talked about, and you never know how you could help someone, especially in the case of today's episode. This was actually the episode that started off me thinking about doing these episodes, and I understand that I may be subjecting myself to some online remarks, to some negativity because I am focusing on these episodes, but I just felt like I had an obligation to do something to bring light to these topics that really so many people struggle with, but struggle in silence. I know how I felt with my amenorrhea, that I wasn't able to tell anyone about it. I felt like I was broken and that no one really knew what I was going through. But these are often more serious than that. But I figured out I wasn't alone, and I want to help people listening feel that they are not alone too. And often with the case of these episodes, we might be knowing someone who is going through one of these issues or all of them. And we don't know what to say or don't know how to act. So hopefully these episodes will help shed some light on that too. All right, so today, this episode is about suicide. As you will hear, that's not actually the term recommended for use anymore. However, that is obviously the term that people know what that means. So I wanted to make that the title of this just so you could know this is what we're talking about and so we could learn about this. Now, today, this episode, I have Shelli Gordon on the show, and she is a wonderful human being. She's a lovely woman, a runner, who her partner, Tony, actually took his life in 2018. And she has since become an advocate for raising awareness about people who take their life, about committing suicide. And she really has been putting herself out there by being honest and open about what happened. And one of you actually recommended her to me. So thank you so much for doing that. And it is just a much needed episode. This is a really important topic, probably the most important one of all, because if this one doesn't exist, then we would have the loved ones who are no longer here with us. So we are going to meet Shelli Gordon. We're going to learn from her. These episodes, as you will hear, do not have any ads. The reason is this is not about ads. This is not about part of my business. This is just me genuinely wanting to help people who are going through a hard time. All I ask is if you do appreciate these episodes, you consider supporting me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/running for real with the number 4. Your $5 could make a huge difference, and you also get lots of bonus information, and you also get to ask your questions to upcoming guests on the Running for Real podcast. So you do get some bonus stuff there. If you are enjoying these episodes, I hope you will consider supporting me on there. Right, so let's go meet Shelli. But before we do that, I just want to say this episode could be triggering. Shelli talks about why it is good to talk about this topic, why we do need to reduce the stigma, and that is going to come from talking about it. It doesn't give people the idea about this, but this is a sensitive topic, obviously, so maybe listen with headphones if you think it could be upsetting for some people. So that being said, let's go meet Shelli. Shelli, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast. This is a topic we're going to be talking about today that is just the one that started this entire Beyond Running series. It's something I've been thinking about for a while. And I'm so honored to be able to talk to you today about it. So thank you for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, no, this is going to be very educational. We're going to learn a lot. You are just a wonderful person yourself. So I'm excited for everyone to kind of get to know you and follow along with you, and maybe to come visit you, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But let's talk about your running, just how you kind of got into it a bit first. You know, you started pretty young for a runner, about 11 years old. Tell us about how running came into your life and how it's still there all these years later.
A lot of years later. I started running when I was 11. I was always involved in walking and outdoors, and we helped on checkpoints. My stepdad did a lot of running. And then when I was 11, I came third from last in a cross country at school, and then joined a running club as a result. And then started going running with my stepdad and doing a little bit. And then when I was 13, I entered a 25-mile race.
Absolutely amazing.
Came third lady, which is all right. It's good when you're 13 and you get a bit of attention and made papers and things, and then basically kept it going. And then
tell them about the next one at 15, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay, so then I did an ultra, which was 56 miles when I was 15.
How did you even, let alone the physical aspect of that, but how mentally, because I've never done more than a marathon, but I hear about the kind of very, very dark places that your mind goes to during an ultra. I can only imagine the dark places a 15-year-old mind would go to in an ultra. So how did you do that, mentally?
I think mentally wise, it's probably easier at 15 because you don't have a concept of how far that distance is. Whereas I think as an adult, you know, driving wise, how long that is and roughly how long that takes you. But as a child, I don't think you have that same concept. So for me, it was more the scary moments when it was dark and things like that, and going through the woods and worrying about was I going to get lost. It was more of that side. That
you're probably thinking about if a boy you liked would why he had ignored you at lunch that day or something.
Yeah, that was the only mental bit.
Yeah, I guess that would make sense. And you've done many ultras since then, and I think most people listening would have heard of UTMB in 2014. So tell us quickly, what was that one like?
Yeah, I did UTMB 2014. I loved it. It was really, really tough. And then I went back in 2016 and managed to get an elite start, which is really good. But I got heat stroke and got pulled out at 60 miles in, which wasn't very good. And I ended up back in an ambulance back. So that wasn't fun.
Yeah, I could have.
Race.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just impressive to me that you've done all these ultras at various distances and just managed to, you know, do a lot of impressive things with your running. And, you know, now you have this running shop in Stokesley in England. So anyone who lives in Yorkshire should be going to visit. I did tell Shelli, my sister lives there, so I hope to be visiting sometime soon. Not that close, but close enough. So tell us about, you know, Let's Run. How did that come about for something you wanted to do?
Okay, so I used to be in the police, and then I'd always wanted to have a running shop or to have something running related. I met Tony, who actually, he had a running shop up in Northumberland. We were friends quite a long time. We ended up getting together at a friend's wedding, and then he moved down to where I was, and we opened the shop together. So I had a bit of an overlay of police and the running shop for a little bit, and then left the police and just focused solely on the shop.
Mm-hmm. And what did you kind of have in mind for your vision for the shop? What was it? Just you kind of wanted it to be the place that runners picked up their shoes, or what was the kind of drawing point that you wanted to?
I don't think for me, it was more, I wanted a place that wasn't intimidating, was more of a community. And as a female runner, I used to find it going into running shops as when I was younger there. And I knew that I could run and that I'd done loads of races. And I used to find really intimidating places. And they all just seemed to be very elite. And I felt out of my depth. And I had my children quite young. So I was always worried about how they were behaving in the shop and worrying about thinking, oh, God, don't touch that and don't do this. So I wanted it really relaxed. And you can come in with your kids and it's fine. We have cakes on Saturdays. So keep the children entertained. It's dog friendly. I have dogs, and it's just a meeting place for runners to go to, and that's what it's turned out to be.
And it has continued to this day to be like that. That's awesome. That's really great. And And I bet people in Stokesley and all around appreciate that. I remember growing up in England, driving, I want to say like 45 minutes, maybe even an hour to go to the running shop to get like fitted. And it was like one of the like important moments of my life at the point. So it's kind of cool thinking that you were kind of that person for some people who wanted to go to a store like yours. So thank you for sharing that with us. And tell us about Tony. You mentioned about you two kind of getting together, and tell us a bit about his running, how he got into it, and how he ended up at Let's Run with you.
So Tony used to run a bit younger days. Then he went to football. Then he had a little boy who had Down syndrome, so he decided to do a run to try and raise some money, which he did. And then he got back into his running, joined his local running club, then joined a fell club, and then he just worked in sales previously, and then decided he was opening up a running shop. So he did, but a lot of it was online rather than it was on the industrial estate. So people still used to travel there. I remember travelling up there before. So people would still travel to see him, but it was more of an online base, community base. And then he moved down with us, and we opened up a proper shop in a high street and changed things.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so, I mentioned at the beginning the topic of this episode is suicide. This is obviously a very difficult subject to talk about because it is just, it's heartbreaking. It's something that is unknown. There's definitely a stigma attached to it, and I want to kind of address that today. But for someone listening, if you could maybe tell us, what happened with Tony and why he's no longer with us today.
Yeah, of course. Tony and I, we lived together, we worked together last summer, July 2018. He'd been at the pub to watch the football. I'd had my daughter at a riding lesson, gone to pick him up. He'd changed pubs from where he was going to be, but I hadn't read my text messages to know that. So I was outside the pub he should have been at, and then found out however long after he was at a different one. So he got in the car and he was cross. And then when we got back home, it was only a couple of miles down the road, but we got back home and I just went in the house and just thought, right, staying out the way. I've got loads of school stuff to organise. I need to get my daughter in bed. And he stayed out. We had a camper van. He stayed out in the van. And my daughter said she wanted to sleep with me and to stay in bed. So I just went up to bed with her, and I never went back out to the van. The next morning we have horses, and I bring them in early because I have to cross the road with them. So I'd gone out, he didn't come in, but I just thought, well, he's drunk, he'll have just slept through, so I didn't really think much of it. And then I'd taken my daughter to school, and when I came back home from school, I thought he would have been in the house. Anyway, he wasn't, but I had lots of ordering to do for the shop, so I was just getting on with all of that, and I do a ladies running group, and that was that morning. Anyway, so he hadn't come in, and I thought I better check he's actually opening up the shop. So I went to see what was happening with him, and it was only when I got to the van, because the blinds were down on it, but we'd had some stock in the van, so the blinds were covering that stock. And it was only when I got round to the other side, to the passenger window, that I could see in the van, and he'd hung himself. So I found him, and then it was all emergency services. But being ex-police, I knew what to expect and knew it was classed as a crime scene because it's a sudden death and it's to establish it. So I suppose I knew the protocol and what to expect around that. So I suppose I went into automatic professional mode with it, because I smashed the window. Yeah, but then you still have that moment, and even though I knew that he died, I still had that moment of thinking, right, no, actually, can I save him? But the doors were all locked. We didn't have a spare key, and it's amazing how many things go through your mind in that short space of time. And then running to go and get a hammer to put the window through, and then smash the window. I got in, and then obviously it was too late. And then I was already on the phone to police and ambulance, and that's like a three-way conversation, which I've never been the person making that call before. I've always been the person being dispatched to it. So I wasn't aware that they did it as a three-way conversation. So they then rang me back because I said, I'd given her all the instructions where I was, said, look, I know it's a crime scene, I won't be leaving anywhere, but I've got 2 calls to make. I've got a ladies running group, they're going to start ringing me, and I've got a shop and people will start ringing me if it's not open. And I know that once everything gets here, it's going to be bedlam, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to cope with any of that. So I hung up, made 2 calls. Paramedics then rang me back and asked me to cut him down and to do CPR. So that's what I did. I took him down, but one of my ladies from my running group's actually a doctor, and she was driving past my house, so she came in and just said, no, it's definitely too late. So she sort of told the ambulance, the dispatch. So, and at that point, I think I lost it a bit, and I think probably because help had arrived, and it was okay then to sort of let go a bit and to step back and let somebody else take over from that.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you what did the weeks after that look like? You often hear about kind of guilt from the spouse, from the partner, of kind of not looking at your own life and what you could have done, should have done. Did you kind of experience that? And for someone listening, let's start with that, who may have also been through the situation that you were in, what would you like to say to that person as well?
There's some aspects from that, because you think, well, if I'd just gone back out there and if I told him to come back in, but then I think when I look at it objectively, I think, no, he's an adult, the door was unlocked, he could have walked back in at any time, he chose to stay out there. And if he hadn't been feeling the way he would have done, I was totally unaware of how he was feeling as well. So I hadn't had any build-up of depression. He'd had no doctor's visits. He hadn't disclosed anything to me, and we worked together and we lived together. He'd never said anything to me. He'd been a bit grumpy, but that's all I put it down to, that he was just tired and grumpy, nothing else. There was nothing that I could sort of say, well, he's done that, he's done this. There's a little bit of history there, or I know that he's not feeling great. He never told me he wasn't feeling good. So I didn't really have anything. So I think if I look at it objectively, I think, no, actually there's nothing there that I could have seen, and I'm not to blame. We've had a daft argument, which was one-sided argument, because I thought, I'm not arguing with somebody who's drunk. I've got my child to sort out and pack lunches to sort and cooking things that she needed, measuring out for school the next day. It was just a normal standard family evening, I suppose. And I think for anyone that is in that same situation, some people will blame you, and I've experienced that myself. Really? I have been blamed from some members of family, but I'm not gonna accept that, because I haven't done anything wrong, and people that are in that same situation, they haven't. And if you believe that and start believing that, you're going to end up in the same situation. And you can't do that to yourself and to your own children and your own family members. You can't do that.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Mental illness.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And, it has to be hard to share that story, but thank you for your bravery in doing that. And you didn't just take that bravery in kind of sharing Tony's story, but you also have taken some suicide awareness courses that have kind of helped you, and you're now kind of an advocate helping other people, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show here. So you mentioned, there isn't, and I agree, there isn't anything you could have done looking back, but looking back now, you must have spent some time kind of going over maybe signs you had seen. So for someone listening who maybe does have a loved one, who is having a hard time, what are some things you noticed now you think back that could be kind of a warning sign that someone isn't, in a good place?
Yeah, I think I'm very aware of it now, especially for my friends and people as well, that I'm just really aware, thinking, right, are they okay? And if someone's a bit quieter than normal, I know if people have come in the shop and they'll drop in and see me and they're particularly quiet, I'll send a text message afterwards and just say, are you all right? And then just double check, and just people are very quick to say, yeah, I'm fine. No worries, but now I'll delve a bit deeper. Are you sure? What's going on? What's happened today? And trying to get people to open up and to talk. And regardless of whether people are showing signs of it or not, I think more what I found with Tony was that I didn't get any signs. And it's to make people aware that not everybody's had some major life event happen, whether it be a divorce or the death of a parent, or a loss of a job or a drug or alcohol problem or something, there's not always something major that's happened to cause it, because I think people look for a cause and they look for an effect. Say, this is the reason why it's happened. That's happened to them. This is why they did it. And sometimes it just isn't. Sometimes it's just a build-up of history of things that throughout their life, and it's either a breaking point that they get to, and it could just be something so minor, but that's enough to send somebody over the edge. And it's just trying to keep people talking, I think, and keeping people involved and not be pushed away if they're trying to push you away. And it could be very aggressive in pushing you away, but it's just making sure you're still there for when they want to talk.
Yeah. And what kind of things would you suggest someone could say to kind of, you mentioned kind of saying, are you all right? And kind of digging into it, or like, is everything okay? Is there, we don't want to kind of come across as like adding to the problem by being like, tell me, because I know I can do this. Like, tell me what's wrong. Are you okay? Please tell me what's wrong. Like, it really bothering me. Like really pushing buttons. So
sometimes it's just being able to just have a normal conversation about something entirely different, and just getting people talking, because I think, and even talking about something that's going on with yourself, and if they think they're helping you as well, sometimes it's just taking that focus of everything's so intense, I can't cope, that you suddenly realise then actually you're not the only one that can't cope. So that somebody else is going through something similar, and then you realise you're not on your own, and that suicide's not the only way out. Yep. And it's just trying to get that message across, and even running and walking, and where you don't have to do eye contact and it's not so intense, and it's just like, well, let's go out for a walk and just chatting while you're walking. And if you've got dogs, and you're chatting out for a walk with the dogs, or with children, if it's your female friends that you're going out with and things. And it's just sharing those things, and sharing the things that, not everything's rosy. And I think social media is very good at making everyone look like they're having a fantastic time, when actually you might be having a really awful time at that moment, and you just think you're the only one that's having a bad time. So
let's go into that then. For someone listening who is, as you say, and as I've said, having a hard time, they are looking around, all they see is how happy everyone else is, how wonderful everyone else is. If they are feeling like they're not sure if they can keep doing this anymore. When I did the episode on depression, Matt kind of talked about it as saying that it was like he knew a secret that the world was doomed, and no one else. He knew this secret, and everyone else was just delirious and didn't see the truth. So for someone listening, what kind of things may they recognize in themselves, and what should they do if they are kind of feeling like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. This is too hard. Like, I'm fed up. From what you've learned in your experience, what would you say?
It's the symptoms that you're seeing yourself, and it's looking at it. And if you just think that, right, everything I see is negative, and you're having thoughts that, no, life isn't worthwhile, they'd be better off without me, my children would be better off without me, my wife would be, my husband would be. It's, you need to get help at that point. You can't just leave it and think things are going to get better. You need somebody else to help you. And it doesn't matter how much you think people are going to be better off without you. They're not. I'm one of the ones that has been left behind and dealing with that. And there's no way I'm better off with Tony dead. That hasn't improved my life. I do not feel any better the fact he's gone here. Whether he thought that would be better for me or not, I do not know. Tony didn't leave me a note, so I've got no idea of his thought processes in that time leading up to what he did. But you need to get help, and whether that's the case that you don't want to speak to somebody you know, and you don't want to add any more stress to somebody that you love, you ring a helpline, or you messenger or an internet one, or ring the doctors. You need to speak to somebody that you either trust or somebody that can help you, because that stage passes. And if you're at a point that you're thinking suicide is the only option, you need to take another 5 minutes more, or send a text message to a friend. And if they haven't replied, send a text message to another friend, or to another people. Just send a message. And even if it's just like, could do with some help, or could do with a chat, or do you want to meet for a drink? And just because they haven't replied instantly does not mean that they don't love you, they don't care for you, and that you're better off dead because nobody wants you. That is not the case whatsoever. You just need to go and get that help.
And is that kind of from the training and the course you've taken, is that kind of what people tend to be thinking, that people are off better without them and they don't want to burden people? Like, does that come down to?
Yeah, a lot of it does, because those thoughts, they just build and build and build, and whatever has started it, it's just what continues it and how that spreads. And then suddenly you find that you've had maybe an argument with somebody, or you've had a real bad day at work, but that's just added to everything else that's been going on. And then you just think, well, if I'm not here, they'll be better off at work because they'd be able to get on without that, and I'm obviously causing problems there. And you might then have to go home and have an argument with the kids, or an argument with your other half, and you just say, you feel like you're the only person that's causing all of these issues, and that if you're not there, people would be better off. Mm-hmm. But it's not the case. That is your mental health at that stage, and you need to do something about it. Okay.
And if you could give one more kind of, for someone listening who your words are resonating, they're saying, I just, I don't feel like I'm that bad. I maybe I will if I need to. It's just the odd thought. If someone is right now listening to you, if they were me looking at you right now, what would you tell them? Like, just from your heart, from anything else you would add?
If they're having that odd thought, now's the time to do something about it, because it's so much easier to treat and for you to just get back to how you were and to feel, well, normal again.
And it is possible, right? Yeah.
And it absolutely is. And the easier it's easier the quicker you deal with it. And it's so easy to just get sucked into it, and you just feel like you're in a downward spiral that you're never going to get out. But there is a way out. And if you're just starting to have those thoughts, go and speak to somebody. And it's not a case that you're going to get put on lots of medication. It might just be a case of, right, we can do this, or try this counselling for however long. Right, we're going to put you in touch with these. And suddenly it's just been halved, and all that pressure's just been lifted off you. It's not just for you to deal with that along with everything else, life pressure. Mm-hmm. You're sharing that problem.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelli. And let's just talk about the stigma associated a little bit. Now, you and I talked about this a few minutes before, about how, it isn't the correct terminology anymore to say that you committed suicide, that really, and I'd like you to maybe explain why that is the case, but why to say take your own life, and then tell us a bit about that negative stigma that's associated to taking your own life, and why we need to kind of talk about it to get that out there.
Yeah. I found out, Tony, that suicide it's got real negative connotations. It's like a quite secretive world, it seems to be, and it's very much, people will talk about it and people say they've committed suicide, but commit is to commit an offence. So it's got negativity around it straight away. It's with other illnesses that you'll die from, there isn't that negativity around it. It's more, so I suppose, respect and empathy for that person that's had that suicide. It's, they've committed suicide. So it's better to say they've taken their own lives, and that's not so negative. And it's a bit more respectful, I think, as well. That's still a phrase that I'm learning now, because I've always committed suicide, and I know that's what the phrase I used with Tony. For the stigma attached around it, there definitely is. I think policies don't pay out, depending on the circumstances around it. There's just so much around suicide that makes it such a difficult thing to be involved with. I know after Tony died, family members didn't want me to put anything out about the fact it was suicide that Tony had died from. I wanted to be open and honest about it from day one, but to respect other people's opinions as well. But then it's very secretive with why he's died. But then people were asking me, saying, has he had a heart attack while he's running? Because he was so young and he was a runner. People were worried about that. My little nephew, he didn't dare run in case he had a heart attack. And he was only 11. And I wanted to be really open about it, say, no, this is what happened. This is get people talking. So that's what I've just been on a mission to do, to get people talking and to get people checking up on their friends and checking up on their relatives.
So, on the note of getting people talking, for someone listening who might be thinking, how does getting people talking help? Isn't that going to put the idea in more people's minds? Isn't that going to make things worse? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, definitely. If people talk about suicide, you are not going to make someone take their own lives. you're more likely to prevent somebody taking their own lives because somebody's going to be able to talk about it. And if they're talking about it, they're not planning a suicide, and their thoughts aren't on doing that. Their thoughts are on sharing what's going on in their life at the minute and how they're feeling. Mm-hmm. And it's asking for that help, whether it's a direct plea for help or it's saying how bad you're feeling and how things are, that you get to talk that through with somebody else and share that problem.
Yeah. Okay. And then, how else does talking about it help? Like, how else can we talk about it to keep bringing it out there? Is it just checking in on people, like we said? Like, what else does that mean?
I try to check in with people, especially my friends that I know are having a rough time and things, but also I'm much more open if I'm having a hard time, because nobody's invincible, and it doesn't matter how much people think they are. Everyone thinks it happens to somebody else. The same with all illnesses. It happens to somebody else's family. It happens to somebody else. It doesn't happen to you and people you know and people you love. Mm-hmm. But just because it hasn't doesn't mean it never is going to happen to your family. And you don't know the circumstances that just provide that trigger to send somebody on that downward spiral. And it is just talking about mental health. I'm really open about it. I talk about it all the time in the shop. If people come in, I'll say, and they mention Tony or something, or they don't want to mention Tony, I'll talk about Tony all the time and say he took his own life last year. People are very concerned about it and they don't want to talk about it and very apologetic, saying, I'm really sorry, I didn't know. And I went, no, it's fine. I talk about it. I want to talk about it, and I want people to share their experiences and to be open about it.
So then on that note, when you said people say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, what is kind of the appropriate response if someone does say to you about someone important to them who has committed suicide? Like, what kind of things should you say back to that person?
I think you maybe need to be guided by them as well, because I know I am really open about it, but I know some people I've spoken to are still very quiet about it, and it's maybe a generation thing as well. So maybe older generation, if it's happened to their offspring, they maybe don't want people to know that's what happened. So it's maybe being guided by them. But if they're talking about it and open about it, it's sharing stories. And if you knew that person, saying, oh, they did this with me, and it's nice to talk about them. And it's not a case of, we can't mention them because they took their own lives.
Yeah, kind of like celebrating their life. Yeah. Okay. And then you and I talked about this before, so I know this is okay to bring up, because I don't want people to think I'm just launching this at Shelli. But I've seen a lot of people, particularly online, because people have a lot more confidence behind their computers, say that taking your own life is selfish, because you mentioned earlier about they think it's better off for family and friends. By taking your life, you're taking that burden off people. But on the other side of things, people see things as, well, you're actually leaving them in this world of pain that they have to go through. And like kids, you mentioned Tony had a son, Jack. What is your response to kind of the thing of saying people are selfish because now this kid grows up without a dad? Like what have you found about that?
It isn't a selfish act. And when people are in that situation, that is the only way out. Mm-hmm. They don't see another way out. And if they did, they wouldn't be taking that action. And everybody obviously sympathises with people that are left behind and having to deal with all of that. But for that person in that moment, there isn't another way out. They can only say, everyone's going to be so much better off without me. I'm causing this pain and I'm the causation of it. So it's not a selfish act. They're trying to make things better for everybody else that they're leaving behind.
Yep. And thank you for explaining that, because that obviously is something that maybe is difficult to talk about, difficult to think about. But obviously that is something that some people do think about and say. So I'm glad I have a response now. Yeah. So what about some resources? You mentioned, obviously you're in the UK, so it's going to be different for the US, but you said there's like chat versions, there's online versions, there's phone numbers, there's what are some resources that people can learn if they do have someone who maybe has tried to take their own life in their family and they're trying to learn about, the signs, things like that, or someone who is listening who has considered taking their life, what they can do to kind of make a change if they aren't ready to speak to someone in person?
Yeah. Some of the ones that I've been supporting for and looking at, and this is all new to me because this wasn't a world I was involved in just over a year ago, but Calm is the charity that I've done a lot of work for, which is Campaign Against Living Miserably, but it's all around male suicide and male mental health, so that resonated with me and my circumstances. But they provide a helpline, they have running groups, they seem to do a lot, and it seemed to work for what I was doing. But depending on your age group, so there's some that are aimed at the younger children. I just forget the name for it now, but there's one that's more towards children. Then there's Mind. So Mind is all across the UK. I don't know whether
I'm not actually sure. I will put a link in the show notes to that just in case.
So Mind, obviously, they do a lot, but they have different groups running and things as well, so you can join in with those. And it's even just having a look at joining just some normal groups. So like for us, we do some trail running groups, but I encourage everyone to come along to that, and you don't have to talk if you don't want to. And it's just, sometimes it's just being with people and just not having to be involved, but still being in a group. And it's just real looking out for each other.
Absolutely. And this is just where I want to kind of shout out to my my community online, the superstars. As everyone who is in there knows how supportive and just kind and loving people are. And I know people check in with each other through direct messages all the time, which is just so special. So even if you don't have the confidence or aren't interested in making an in-person group, there are online groups where you can feel part of it and really get to know people. I mean, the superstars community in particular, I know there's people, some of the group have gone on vacation together, they've gone to visit one another, so you can make friends online even if you're not quite ready to share your story with someone in person.
Yeah, you can do. But it is just reaching out there, whether you are somebody worried about a person or your other person is going through it. There are so many things out there, and it's just taking that extra step, and it's keeping you alive that little bit longer, and it's giving your family a chance to help save you, isn't it?
Yeah,
save
absolutely.
Life.
Thank you, Shelli. That's so important. Now, talk about running. Can running come into this? You mentioned, Tony loved to run. How can running kind of help with someone who is considering taking their life, or for someone who is kind of processing someone who has taken their life?
I think running gives you the opportunity to be outside. I think outside is better than being on a treadmill where you're enclosed, and you're possibly in a safe environment, but sometimes when things are bad, that can be more intimidating. Whereas if you're getting out, running, the fresh air, open space, it just gives you a chance to either run away from demons, clear your head, or run with a group and talk to people, or just listen while they talk. But it's just, I think running is just so important. It gets your adrenaline going, and you come back feeling, okay, right, I'm ready to fight another battle. Whether you are in battle or not, you come back thinking, right, okay, I can cope with what life's going to throw at me again.
And have you used running yourself? I mean, I know you did the spine race, which you should maybe tell people about this year, but how has running helped you in healing?
It's definitely helped. I think if I didn't have my running, I don't know whether I would be in this position of being able to talk to yourself and to be so open in the shop and to be able to talk to people. It just gives you something to aim for, whether you enter a race, whether you never enter a race, whether you want to aim to do a mile or whether you want to aim to do 300 miles. It just gives you something to keep on aiming for and to keep alive for, doesn't it? It just... Yeah.
And I think also the simplicity of being out there, you can appreciate nature and appreciate your ability to do it. And it can kind of maybe bring you home to some of the nice things in life, even if your relationships or your work or your situation isn't the best, you can always be outside in nature. So.
And I think sometimes running as well, if you run really hard and you feel like you're beating yourself, and if you feel that you need punishing, you can run so hard to make yourself feel bad, but in a good way.
Is there a too far you can go with that though?
Yeah, I think running can tend to be a bit addictive as well though. So if you're getting to the stage that you're feeling ill because you're not going running. It's just trying to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
to make yourself feel better, but not to make yourself feel
not
worse.
Too far. Yeah, which is a difficult line to walk sometimes when you're going through a tough time. All right, Shelli, just going to ask you 2 of our running for real 4 final questions. Are there any social media accounts or people who have inspired you since last year, who you would like the listeners to go follow or kind of learn from in the future?
Okay, I've been thinking about this because I'm not particularly good with things like this. So Jasmine Parris is the lady that won.
Jasmine Parris, yes, absolutely, good choice.
Yeah, you'll probably know her, but I just think how inspiring, female breaking men's record, women's record, and breastfeeding. Yeah. Just showing that, yes, you can do it if you want to, and there's no excuses.
And just for the record, for my listeners who have been bugging me about her, I am trying very hard to get Jasmine on this podcast, but so far, no luck, but I will keep trying. All right. And Shelli, tell us about a running for real moment, something that only runners will understand.
Oh, I've had so many moments. Lost in the middle of the moors, thinking, where on earth am I? I am never going to get myself back to it.
So explain what the moors are for someone who is in the US and doesn't know what that is.
Okay, so the moors where we are, it's lots of heather and nice flowers, and it's quite remote. And when you're off on the moors and you suddenly realise you're lost a couple of hours from home and you need to be back to make school and make the school run, and you have to have that awkward moment when you ring school again to say, really sorry, but I'm a couple of hours away from my car. Is there someone there that can collect my child for me?
Well, and I will tell people listening that the moors are quite different to what we have here in the US. You got to kind of imagine it would be like in the middle of like farmland, but you're not going to get like chased off the property. It's like in the middle of nowhere, but it's not necessarily in the mountains or on a trail. It's just kind of like grass and greenland and like flowers and trees. So but the US is kind of very like territorial. You've got your space. So I can't really think of too many places like that that do have something like that. But in England, it's very much kind of from what my experience has been, you can kind of go where you want for the most part. Apart from a few people who like to keep their land to themselves. All right. Shelli, thank you so much for being honest and open and just really sharing your heart with us. We really appreciate you, and thank you for allowing me to bring this conversation to the forefront. It is something that is so important to talk about, particularly. Just before we go, I didn't ask this earlier. Anything you would say for someone with like teenagers, or because we're hearing more and more about this? Did you learn anything about? Is there anything different to do around if you have like a son or a daughter who is a teenager who is acting a bit off? Anything different that should be done there?
Just be very aware, and that was another thing that I should have mentioned as well. Sometimes when they've made that decision that they're going to go through with suicide, there can be a bit of especially if they've been going through problems a bit and you've noticed they've been down, and then they might be a little bit happier and cheerful and you think, oh, we're through it, it's resolved. But sometimes that's that point before they do take their own lives, because they're happy that they've made a decision that yes, there's a way out of all of this, and they're happier with that decision they've made and know, right, the end's in sight, I'm coming to the end. So I know from speaking to a mum whose son had taken his life, and that was what she experienced, and she thought, oh brilliant, he's not arguing with his sister anymore, he's cheerful, he's come down for dinner, he's spoken with us, move on the up, everything's going to be okay. Okay, so if in doubt, especially with teenagers, say something. Don't just kind of assume it'll be okay or put it down to, normal teenager grumpiness, I guess. Okay. Well, Shelli, thank you so much for the interview today, for sharing that with us. I truly appreciate you, and you are a bright, shining light. So thank you for all that you're doing to raise awareness too. Thank you, Tona. My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better.
It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Right, friends, can you do me a favor right now? Get your phone out. No, don't open up Instagram or Facebook. Get your phone out, get your messages up, go send a text to a friend, to 2 friends, to 3 friends who you think could be susceptible to just having a hard time. Not even maybe that they are considering taking their life, but we all are so busy with our day-to-day lives thinking that we have caught up with each other through social media, that we know what's going on with one another's lives, that we don't really tend to reach out. So take a minute right now, reach out to a friend, a family member who you love and really care about and want them to know that you are there for them. If you have any new mothers in your life, and I'm not talking about new mothers as in someone who had a baby yesterday, but someone who had a baby maybe a month to 6 months ago, those people in particular, they need that hug. They need that kind of check-in. And don't ask how the baby is, ask how they are as people. I can just say on behalf of mothers out there that it can be quite lonely. And so if you do have someone who is at home with a child, that is a great person to do. But I want you to do that. Text 1 to 3 people right now. Just let them know that you're thinking about them. You never know how much of a world of difference that could make. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you appreciated that episode with Shelli. I know that was quite a sensitive one, an emotional one. It's something that is really just heartbreaking to hear about people feeling, like Shelli said, that there is no way out. And if that is you, can you please reach out to me, reach out to Shelli. I will have her website on the show notes. You can find her website there if you want to speak to her. Reach out to me, reach out to someone. I will not judge towards you. I will be there for you as much as I possibly can. And so will whoever you reach out to. But please just, if you are in that situation, be brave, speak out to someone who is a stranger or speak out to someone you know and love, just someone. And if you would share this episode with people, the more we can get this conversation kind of going, the less of this week hopefully will be coming about. As you heard Shelli said, a lot of it is this social media world where we think everything is going right. And we know that behind the scenes, it's not a perfect life. None of us have a perfect life and we ever will. But the more we can kind of bring this conversation out and talk about mental health, the better off our society, our world is going to be. If you appreciate me and these episodes, I would really appreciate your support on Patreon. It means so much that you support me with just a few dollars, pounds, euros, whatever per month. You get bonus episodes, you get the opportunity to ask upcoming guests your questions. And it just means a lot to me that you have taken the time and the giving some of your hard-earned money. I really appreciate that to support me. So thank you so much for that. On Friday, we have Nicole DeBoom, who is the founder of Skirt Sports, and she is heading into her 15th year. They are celebrating an anniversary at Skirt Sports. But Nicole isn't just the founder of Skirt Sports. She is a fantastic person, an entrepreneur, a wonderful woman. She was a world-class triathlete. She has a great story, and I think you're really going to enjoy that one. So if you haven't already subscribed, go subscribe, and you will be able to listen to Nicole on Friday. Now, next Monday in this Beyond Running series, we're going to be talking about running with disabilities with some athletes from and the head of the New York chapter of the Achilles International headquarters. So I look forward to giving you more information about that. Until then, have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.